And we can bring in now Professor Meg Russell, who's a Professor of British and Comparative Politics and Director of the Constitution Unit at University College London. So thanks for being with us. How do you see this vote? Do you see it as effectively and potentially tying the hands of the next Prime Minister, particularly Boris Johnson, if it were him, if he did want to prorogue Parliament, to do that?
Well, I think what it is at the very least is a very strong signal. The numbers are interesting. It's quite a heavy defeat. And indeed, later on, we're all expecting a shake-up in government if Boris Johnson becomes Prime Minister, and that quite a number of ministers will be leaving government who might in the future be keen to block no deal. So the numbers are not going to get any better for him. At the very least, this is a strong signal of where the numbers are lying in Parliament and the obstacles that he would face. But it's also clearly trying to put very practical obstacles in the way, requiring by law ministers to come back to Parliament on a regular basis, which means that Parliament has to be sitting. So, yes, this is quite significant.
And just explain to us, if Parliament were prorogued, people have talked about the constitutional crisis that would spark, and it would involve the Queen, and it would be something, I mean, not unprecedented, but it would be a huge step. I mean, just talk us through exactly what it would mean constitutionally.
Well, look, at one level, prorogation is absolutely normal. It generally happens once a year between one session and the next before the Queen's speech. So prorogation is certainly not a dirty word, but what is very unusual is the idea of proroguing Parliament for a political reason, and specifically in order to prevent MPs taking a decision that they want to take. And that is a very, very problematic idea. And it's been objected to by many people across the political spectrum, including, for example, Andrea Leadsom when she was running in the Conservative leadership. And, she's very strongly in favour of Brexit. So there's a constitutional principle here that you don't close down Parliament in order to prevent Parliament making decisions. Sure, you prorogue on a sort of administrative basis for a few days before a Queen's speech, but some people have been talking about there being a Queen's speech conveniently at the beginning of November in order that, what a surprise, Parliament's going to have to be prorogued in the middle of October. And that's clearly manoeuvring in order to do something that MPs don't want doing. And they've sent a very clear signal today that they don't want it doing. The risk with using prorogation as a political tool is that you bring the monarch into politics, because you need the consent of the monarch in order to prorogue. And if she's presented with a very difficult question as to whether she should give her consent to Parliament being closed down, then you're putting the Queen in a very difficult position. And I think one of the things people are trying to do is avoid that situation occurring here.
Yeah, and how dangerous potentially constitutionally would that be to embroil the monarch like that?
Well, I think people would go to very great lengths to avoid it. And in fact, as I say, I think this vote today is very significant. It is laying down some requirements in law that Parliament has to be sitting, it's not just a signal, it is actually a binding decision of Parliament, binding on the government. But actually, I'm not even sure whether it was necessary, because I think there were other political means of preventing this happening already. MPs, this is a sort of belt and braces approach, if you like. They're going the full way here to make it very clear. Even without this decision today, I think that if the Prime Minister had in the autumn sought a prorogation, it might be that MPs could have blocked that in the autumn, because a prorogation doesn't happen at the snap of the Prime Minister's fingers. There has to be a meeting of the Privy Council presided over by the Queen. That takes some time to organise, and I think that MPs might well have stepped in at that point and said, stop. But I suppose what they've done is try to avoid that situation occurring, try to avoid the involvement of the monarch in this very controversial decision. We're going away for the summer knowing that can't happen, and that's probably rather a relief to Buckingham Palace, I should think.